Hello and welcome to I Can Relate. I'm Jessica Burns. This podcast takes us on people's journeys through personal and sometimes sensitive experiences. These are usually topics that are not spoken about, and the hope here is that by bringing them to light, it'll help others feel less alone in what they're going through. I look forward to embarking on this journey with you as we develop a greater understanding and empathy for one another. Today, I sit down with Josie, who uses the pronouns they and them. Josie identifies as non-binary, asexual, and queer. Non-binary is when you do not identify as a man or a woman. Asexual is when you are not sexually attracted to anyone. And being queer is an umbrella term for sexual and gender minorities who are not straight or perhaps do not identify with their birth gender. Josie grew up in a small town in Germany in the 90s and early 2000s and was badly bullied for being different. When everyone was asking, "Who am I?" Josie was trying to figure out, "What am I?" Josie was called to take their own life by fellow schoolmates, but managed to get through these tough times. Josie said it took years to finally realize, "I am not broken." Hello, Josie. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How's your day going?
That's nice. Just, weather isn't the best, but that's fine. Just spent the day inside with my cat.
What's your cat's name?
His name is Picasso, like the painter.
Love that. So, Josie, thank you so much for coming on today. Would you mind sharing your story with us?
So I grew up in the 1990s and early 2000s in a small and then very straight German town. It was very heteronormative, working class kind of German town. And I grew up what people would call a tomboy. So even as kind of a young child, I was already kind of, once I could dress myself, I liked wearing comfortable clothes. I liked just playing in the dirt and playing with cars and everything. So while I was assigned female at birth, I didn't really care about that when I was a child. And as a child, I could just be who I wanted to be. So it didn't really matter to me. Being called a girl back then didn't really have an impact because, yeah, but when you're really young, it doesn't really have an impact as much because you don't quite grasp that there's a difference with how society treats boys and girls yet. That came later. So I was just kind of me, I guess, as a child. But then once we entered high school, which you do in Germany when you're 10, so that's from grade 5 to 12. So when you're 10 to 18 years old, that's German high school. And that's kind of where it started. And I have some very distinct memories. One being when I was about 12 years old, we had substitute teachers that didn't know us. And so they thought they would play a game and decided to split us into boys and girls. And I said, boys go to the left, girls go to the right. And I quite literally stood in the middle and didn't know where to go. And that was kind of my first real moment of, oh no, something is different. But I was 12 years old. I couldn't really place it yet. I just knew that I didn't feel right. And while I had been bullied before for other things, just because I'm also just different, I guess, in other ways. And I'd like to stand up for other people that, were targets of bullies, which then made me a target myself. But that was when it kind of started for occult gender reasons and my expression, because at that point when I was 12, 13, I was trying out a more neutral name or maybe a bit more masculine name for the first time. So people have always called me Josie. That's just always been my nickname, and I'm fine with it today. I don't mind it at all. But at the time, I tried out Joey for the first time with some of my friends, or kind of like an alter ego kind of thing. And I thought I'll just see how it goes with the substitute teachers because they didn't know me. They're probably never going to see me again. So why not ask them to call me Joey just for fun and see how that sounds from an adult? And they were fine. But the rest of the class just started laughing. And some boys in my school that were the main bullies, let's call them that, they used it to make fun of me until we graduated 6 years later. So that pushed me straight back. And that was a very distinct memory of when I was 12, and that kind of started questioning of what is going on. And then, of course, once, puberty hits and everybody kind of starts changing and starts, well, both with your body, but also with your mind, and you start being aware of things and you're starting to question things, that's when it really hit for me that it just didn't feel right. And the way I always explain it is that while all of my peers were trying to figure out who am I was then thinking, what am I? And that was really the question that I had growing up, because I knew that something was off. I just couldn't place it because, again, 90s, early 2000s, there was just no conversation about any of this, about sexuality, about gender, about mental health, none of it. So I just didn't understand. I just didn't know where I stood. And my close friends and my family, they didn't care. They just let me be whoever I wanted to be. But we then also didn't talk about those kind of things because nobody knew that was going on inside my head, because I didn't even understand it. And all I could understand that the people that weren't my close friends saw that something was quote unquote weird about me. And I was also called all kinds of names. I was, called a freak. I was called disgusting. I was called a thing at one point. That was great. That stuck with me, which is also why I say I don't like that the pronoun in German is it, because that kind of relates back to being called a thing. And very dark, so kind of content warning for any listeners, but I was at one point called to take my own life because I didn't have a place in the world. I luckily kind of got over those people that were being very, very harsh and mean, probably because they didn't even understand any of that either, which is not an excuse, but I do kind of understand that they didn't understand what was going on, because neither did I. And I didn't.
Was this over the internet? Or was this in person they were saying these?
No, that wasn't person. That wasn't person. Those were people at my school.
That's
Yeah.
horrible. Oh my God. Oh
They
my-
told me when I was sitting in an open window, they told me to jump out of it.
No.
Yeah.
Did you ever have suicidal thoughts after this?
Before and after, yeah. I was already kind of in that place, so that didn't help. But I guess kind of almost out of spite, I didn't listen to them.
Yeah.
Because I thought like, well, I was thinking that, but just because he said that now, no. But yeah, luckily, I mean, I'm not trying to make light of suicidal thoughts in any way, shape, or form. It was horrible, and I'm very glad that I'm not in that place anymore. And again, those kind of very negative thoughts that I had myself also came from the place of just not understanding what was going on with me. I mean, my sexuality as well. As I said, I'm also gay and asexual, so I didn't understand that at that point either. And I just, when I was younger, I thought that I was broken in some sort of way, and just didn't understand why I couldn't just be quote unquote normal like other people. And it wasn't until we graduated and we had one in the 12 years that I went to school, we had exactly one kid that came out as gay. One in 12 years.
Wow.
And since graduation, other than me, I found, I think, 4 more people just from my class that have come out either as genderqueer, non-binary, or bi, or gay, or anything under the LGBT plus umbrella. At least 4 or 5 more people. But we all waited until after graduation because it didn't feel safe at the time. Or we didn't really understand it at the time.
Were other people being bullied as well?
Yeah, all for kind of different reasons. It was kind of like anything that kind of made you different. And actually, the gay kid was one of the main bullies. And
Wow.
now looking back at it, as much as I despise him for the things that he said and did to me and my friends, I know that it probably came from a place of he's bullying people before he is the target, because he was the only out gay kid. So again, no excuses, but I kind of know where it came from. as much as I resent him for the things I did, I do hope that he kind of found some peace and has seen that he doesn't have to target people, not to be a target himself, because that's really what I think where it came from.
Mm.
Um, but for me, I kind of then um, repressed everything. I want to say I just decided not to tackle any of those feelings until I hit my 20s, and then it didn't feel like I could really ignore things anymore. And also by that time, I had left school, so it felt a bit safer to explore. And that's when I found the magical place, the internet. And first of all, found some new friends. I had kept some of my old friends, but also some new friends from other places that just had different experiences and that talked about their identities and everything. And so the first thing, or the first word that I found was asexual. That was when I was 20. And that I also leaned towards liking women. I also found that when I was 20. Um, and then non-binary, that word, I found when I was 22, 23. I also found it while I was educating myself on our community. I thought, at that point, I knew that I was some way a part of the LGBTQ plus community, albeit I hadn't figured out all of the letters, but I just knew I was part of it somehow. And I wanted to understand our community better and educate myself on it, because I think that's really important. And it's not like gay or queer people are just born with this magical knowledge of our community. So I read into it a lot more, and doing that, I found the word non-binary, and I've read the definition of falling outside of the gender binary, and I read people's stories about it. And as cheesy as that sounds, that was the moment where my life clicked into place. And I literally, when people talk about having those flashbacks where your entire life just passes in front of your eyes, and it kind of was like that, where I was like, oh, now my entire life makes sense. Now I have the words. Now I need to understand what that means to me and how I can live with that and being at peace with myself. And that's the beautiful thing. Since I found those words, I've been so much more at peace with myself, because now I can look back and say, there's a lot of things that are weird about me, definitely, and and I've got mental health stuff and all of that, but at least those things, that being non-binary, being ace, and being gay, those are not things that are broken about me. Those are things that I really like. I love being part of the LGBT plus community. So finding those words was like, oh, that's a thing, and I'm not broken, and I made sense all of those years. I just didn't know it.
I love that you celebrate those parts of yourself now. How do you feel now that you've found those words, the right words? How do you feel when someone misidentifies your gender or perhaps uses the wrong pronouns?
So because I mostly still present in what people would see as traditionally female. So I have, well, mid-length, I guess you would say it, so, but not, a buzz cut or really, really short pixie cut or something. So my hair is fairly long, and I guess my face has fairly, quote unquote, feminine features and those things. So people still read me as a woman. And I just wish that people were mindful or more understanding that just because somebody looks a certain way, that doesn't make them any specific gender. Accidentally misgender myself all the time. I mean, I spent 20 plus years having to gender myself as a girl, woman, she. So it slips out. So if it's just a random, it slips out, mistake, you forgot, that's fine. Correct yourself and move on. It's only if I can tell that somebody doesn't really care, doesn't want to put any effort into it because, oh, it's too hard, that's when I call it out.
That's definitely something I need to rewire my brain to do as well. And I'll fully put my hand up and say that.
It happens, and that's fine. We appreciate the effort, and we realize it does sometimes happen, as long as, just correct yourself, move on, and you're good.
Mm. Do you have other situations where, for example, do gender assigned bathrooms, is that an emotionally distressing experience for you?
Oh, yes. It's why I love working from home, because there's only one bathroom in my house and it doesn't care what gender I am. So
Yeah.
that's the good thing that came with what's going on in the world right now, that lucky since I have an office job, I've been able to work from home, and that's just taken so much stress away because I didn't like it to have to use female bathrooms. The good thing is that at my work there are a couple gender neutral bathrooms, so I would use them if they were available. I'm glad.
What is it about that experience that is so stressful?
It's mostly the gendering, I think. It's just, yeah, it's just seeing a female. As I said, the bathrooms aren't the biggest thing for me. I think it's more about the principle of having to use that, like the width sign and the all female, just triggers something in me that, because I have to gender myself and I know I don't fit there, I know that I don't technically belong there, that
Mm.
just makes me feel really queasy. I have friends that have literally not gone to, in either a work or in when I was still in school, they would literally not go to the bathroom all day for just either the dysphoria or for fear of being kicked out or told that they can't go somewhere.
Mm.
Luckily, it's never gotten that bad with me, but
Yeah.
I know friends who have that kind of feeling as well, that they'll
Oh,
literally wait until they're back home just because they don't feel like they can go in those kind of spaces.
that's so sad.
Yeah.
So, what are there any other like inconveniences that you have to deal with on a daily basis?
So when we speak about non-binary, one of the things is that we're still kind of seen as this sort of invalid identity, I guess. So we're still kind of seen as the snowflakes and you don't exist. And there are only two genders. No, there aren't. So that's kind of something that it often feels like you have to justify yourself and explain over and over. And there's a difference between explaining, like I'm doing right now, to share my story or to educate people, and having to explain yourself because people literally question your identity and your existence. So there's a difference there, and that's something that is very annoying. And also that people do see the ones that kind of do believe that non-binary is a thing, but then have that kind of misconception, I guess, that all non-binary people are the same, that they all look androgynous, that they all have the short hair and whatever clothes, and that you kind of, yeah, you can spot a non-binary person. And yes, some of them you can, but there are also non-binary people that really like whatever gendered clothes, whether it be for the gender that they were assigned or another one. So you can't really tell, and I think that's something that people look at me and say like, oh, you look too much like a girl to not be a girl. And that's
Mm.
something that's really annoying. I was like, my gender expression or the way that I dress and the way my hair is has nothing to do with what I am.
Yeah.
Because I can like dress, I really like dresses, but just because I put on a dress doesn't make me a girl. It's the
Yeah.
same as if a cisgender man puts on a dress, does it make him a girl? No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So you also identify as, or you are asexual. Would you mind
Yeah.
sharing what that means to you?
Yeah, of course. So asexual, again, like NB, is an umbrella term, and also like NB, it has an abbreviation which is ACE, which is ACE. So again, if you hear me calling it ACE instead of asexual, it means the same thing. It's just a short version for it. And so being asexual is an umbrella term for people who feel either no or very limited or low intensity sexual attraction to other people. And it's an umbrella term because there's different identities that fall under it. So there's asexual, which basically means no attraction, um, demisexual, which means that those people can develop a sexual attraction to people, but only after they've established an emotional bond or very emotional connection to somebody. And there's also gray sexual or gray ace, which are people that kind of fluctuate in that gray line between sexuality and asexuality. So they may feel sexual attraction, but only in specific circumstances or only with very specific people. So yeah, there's this kind of a fluidity for them. And yeah, and ace is the umbrella term for all those kinds of identities that fall under it. I just identify as asexual. So for me, that means I am romantically attracted to people. That's where the gay/queer comes in, because again, I am assigned female at birth, non-binary, and I am attracted to women and feminine presenting non-binary people. But I'm only attracted to them aesthetically and romantically, but just not sexually. That's something that's also never really made sense to me and didn't occur to me when, again, going back to the whole puberty thing, when first of all I started to question my gender, and secondly, everybody suddenly starts having their boyfriends and their girlfriends and all of their first experiences, and I was like, they're like, okay, why? I have schoolwork to do. So that was kind of my experience growing up.
Yeah.
And I again, being ace is something that I don't mind. I always say I don't have a problem with it. Some other people have a problem with it.
Did it make you uncomfortable when your friends were talking perhaps about their sex lives?
The good thing is that growing up, the friends that I had, a lot of them are kind of on the ace spectrum as well, which we only found out years later, or they were ones that just didn't want to talk about those things anyway. So that was good. Once I got old and got to know more people and everything, it does kind of make me uncomfortable, especially since, like, most of all, I just can't relate to most of those things, and then I'm also like, I don't need to hear that. I am very sex positive for other people, so I'm always saying, as long as it's consensual and safe, you do whatever you do, whatever makes you happy. That's great, and I'm all for people embracing their sexuality and all of that. It's just that, you just don't involve me. So yeah, it feels weird for me when other people
Don't
talk about
involve
it.
me. I like
Yeah, like, yeah, when that happens, like, kind of like, I just tap out of the conversation. I'm like, all right, that's me done, thank you.
Yeah. So like when a movie's playing and there's like a kissing scene perhaps, or does that make you feel uncomfortable?
I mean, if it's a typical straight scene, then yes, but it has other reasons.
Fair.
No, so I don't mind the kissing scenes as much. So different aces are fine with different things. So again, because ace is a spectrum anyway, but even for asexual people, there are some that even think that kissing goes too far. For some, it's more essential or romantic thing rather than a sexual thing. Some aces even watch porn, some don't. And yeah, so it kind of depends on what that person is comfortable with. And then there are also kind of aces that are very open to either watching those things or even participating themselves in sexual interactions, whereas others are sex repulsed and they literally have kind of a disgusted physical reaction to all of this. So it kind of depends for people. For me, I don't really like watching sex scenes in movies, but also because I think most of them are just poorly done and they're just there and they don't add anything. For me, they don't add anything to the story.
Yeah.
But that's the ace that you can hear. That's literally the ace speaking. I mean, it's like, they don't add anything to the story. Can we move on? Whereas for people that aren't ace, well, I don't know because I'm not one, but I'm guessing for those that maybe nice, but I'm like, all right, can we get back to the story now? But I appreciate it. For others, it's probably different.
Yeah. So do asexual people find it hard to find partners who are just focused on companionship?
I mean, some do, I guess, but I also know a lot of aces that are in happy relationships, because I would say a relationship and love isn't just about sex. It's also about, it's a romance, it's about the feelings, it's about, the trust and caring for each other and, things of having things in common and all of those things. So it's not that big of a deal, I think, if you have a partner who is either happy with maybe taking a step back as well. And then there are also some aces, as I said already, that don't mind. That sounds weird, but yeah, I'll say it like that. They don't mind in participating in whatever sexual interactions or relationships. So some of them may do it either um, because they want to please their partner. Some of them can feel like they're forced, which that is really sad. But others also, like, they're kind of indifferent to it. So, to make their partner happy, like, okay, that's fine. Some may want children, so they may go to whatever means are necessary to do that as well. And and some aces are just happy to find non-ace partners, and then also sometimes two asexuals find each other as well. So that works out nicely. So yeah, again, there's so much more that goes into it, and I just quickly want to say, just so that people understand, so ace or asexual doesn't mean celibate. So there's a difference, and I always use my my cake theory or my cake story to describe that. If you think of cake and look at it, that gay or straight people like a specific kind of cake. Bisexual, pansexual people, they like an array of different cakes. Asexual people, they don't really fancy cake, and if they're sexual, they may be intolerant to some of the ingredients, whereas celibate people are on a diet. So for celibate people, it's a choice that they have cravings, but they don't follow them. They choose to abstain. Whereas asexual people, they just don't feel the attraction, but they can if they want to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it. What makes a relationship different from a friendship if you're asexual?
And I think it's the love behind it. You love a friend different than you love a partner. And again, however far somebody wants to go, and also the romance, there's romance again that doesn't involve sex. So it can be anything, like, holding hands, little gifts, if you're open to that, kissing, making out, things like that. So that I think you wouldn't necessarily all do with a friend. So
Yeah.
those are things that then make it different. So like any relationship you would have with your partner, and then sometimes just minus the sexual relationship, although again some aces are open to that.
Mm. So, going into you identify as queer, what does that mean to you?
And the reason it's important to me is because, looking at my story, I've fought like hell to get here. So I want to be out and loud and proud and kind of say, like, yes, I'm not straight, I'm non-binary, and I'm queer, and I'm also ace on top of it. So when I just say queer, it kind of says, I don't fit into the cis-normative and heteronormative story that people want to tell. So that's why I really like the word, and it's easier to explain if I just say I'm gay. At least, again, it gets the point across. And it's important for me to also note that for many people, the word queer is still really hurtful and a really difficult term to deal with, just because of uh, the way it's been historically used against our community. At the same time, I am very, very much for reclaiming things and reclaiming those kind of words. And for me, as said, it makes sense, but I wouldn't use it for others without their consent and without knowing that they're happy to be described with that word. But for me, it's something that's almost comforting to take that word, especially as somebody who was bullied for their sexual and gender identity. It feels very comforting to now take on that word queer and say, like, yes, that's what I am. So
You're reclaiming it.
yeah,
So, what can people do to support non binary people?
try not to gender people if you don't know them. There are words around it. And also, when you talk about people, unless you know their pronouns, that you speak about people as they, because we already know it. If we don't know somebody, if you find a wallet in the street, you say, oh, somebody lost their wallet. You don't say somebody lost his or her wallet. You generally don't do that. You just say somebody lost their wallet. So we already do it unconsciously. And with English, we have a language that does allow us to use that singular neutral they. So as somebody who doesn't come from a language that has that, embrace it in English. You've got it easy because you have that word. So that's something I would say. Try to be mindful. Try to stop the gendering where it's not necessary. Also, just respect people's pronouns. When they tell you what their pronouns are, then just try and use them. Practice them if you find it difficult at first. Again, totally understand that, but maybe practice them. Even if you just, talking to yourself and practice them. It sounds a bit silly, but it does kind of make a difference. And also the same with names. If people tell you that they'd like to use a different name, then just use it, because that shows it's just a form of respect, and it also really helps people. And then about yourself, even if you're a cisgender person, it really helps when you introduce yourself with your pronouns. And if you work in an office job or something like that, if you put your pronouns into your email signatures, because what that helps, it helps normalize it. And it also doesn't make us feel like the odd one out. It makes it normal for everyone.
I've never thought of it that way. So thank you. Do you have any advice for someone feeling at odds with their birth gender?
You're valid. It's normal. You're not broken. And I need you to always remember that. And there's a community out there that will embrace it. There are people out there that are like you, that understand your story. Yeah, I found that so important, and it just made all of the difference to me to find that community. And it doesn't matter if that community is in person or online. And I don't mean it just because of COVID. I also mean just generally. I found friends that are in completely different countries over the internet, but we have similar stories, and that really helped to connect with somebody who can understand. Try names if you don't relate to your birth name. So again, just try things and know that it's okay if later you say that didn't quite fit, and you change your mind again. That's absolutely okay. But just especially if you're younger, just make sure that you still stay safe. So I'm always here for be yourself and be your authentic self. But I do have to add, because I can't say that all of that with a clear conscience if I don't. If it's not safe for you right now to come out, then maybe see if you can talk to some people that you can trust, but maybe wait with the whole coming out until it's safe for you to do so. But know that there will come a time when it is safe.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll end it there. Thanks again. Bye now.
Bye.
You've been listening to I Can Relate. If you'd like to hear more of these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can do this on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other platform you're listening on. To become a part of the community, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Join me next time for another episode. Thanks for listening.